Hi, this is Camelia. I'm in a planting space in Belgium, and I'm going to share a few things I'm learning about plants and hydration and how I'm relating it to fascia and managing our tensegrity tension in our own bodies to keep us upright. So water, at the moment it's really hot. And although we're watering in the morning and in the evening, the tomatoes get really quite dehydrated. You can see here the soil is really dry, even though we watered in the morning. And when that happens, it starts to drain the capacity of the plant to stand upright. And the same thing happens with us. If we get tension, we stiffen our fascia and the interstitial fluid cannot flow there as easily. And we start to get dehydrated, and then that compromises our ability to stand upright or to move with freedom and flow. So if this is tensed up, then what I have to do is, let's see if we can do this. So if this is tensed up, I cannot swing it as easily. Then I have to kind of keep it together, and I swing from here, and I end up putting more movement in that little part of my spine, as opposed to distributing the movement here and then here and then here. It ends up being here, here, here. So that vertebra there might start suffering, and the disc might get overworked. So we don't want that. So what we would do is we would do an exercise, a treatment for the hands that helps stimulate the interstitial fluid to flow up towards the spine, the upper spine, and allow for hydration in this part of the body, so that the restorative qualities of our nervous system can help release the tension, feed the muscles, let them breathe more, so that they come back to a more natural sea-like movement of contraction and expansion, as opposed to contract, 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 contract. And to do that, we need to stimulate the interstitial fluid. We need to hydrate. This is what hydration means. And it's the same with plants. Plants need to get hydrated morning and evening. So if we have a lot of stress in our life, heat is stress for these plants right now, because they're not planted in the ground yet. They don't have as much resources. They're just like in a little tiny pot. That's a smaller house than if you have like a big fancy house, or you're planted in the soil, in the ground. So this little house can't provide as much water for this plant, so it needs hydration more often. It's the same with us. If we're more stressed, we need to give ourselves more treatments in order to hydrate, in order to compensate for the stress that we are experiencing. Otherwise, that stress will start to accumulate in our shoulder or on our hip, in our jaw, and it can accumulate in different tissues. Like it can accumulate in our muscles, but it can also start to grind down our joints. It can compress our nerves. And then once the muscle starts tightening, you also start to have problems with the lymphatic system, because the interstitial fluid cannot drive out the metabolic waste. So you start accumulating toxins. The brain starts thinking, oh my gosh, they're not sorting things out in that area. So it starts sending stress hormones, and the whole chemistry of your body is destroyed. So if I left these tomatoes without water morning and evening, what will happen is they will get stressed and vulnerable. They would get attacked by pests, because pests, they attack vulnerable entities. It's the same with people. Narcissists attack vulnerable humans that don't have the support of their community or their family. So when we do movement, we're actually helping ourselves deal with stress. Another thing that I wanted to talk about And it's again about hydration, but this time hydration and how we ground through our feet so that we can find our levity in our body with ease and flow. So this was something that I learned from this amazing grower here in Belgium. He's pretty cool. One of my colleagues, I'm actually volunteering here. I don't know if you say colleagues. Can you see? He planted these little beans. Can you see them? They're growing now. I hope this is visible. See, they're growing now. But when he planted them, there was no soil on top. There was no soil, and they were just like, they were on top and we were watering and you could see the beans, so it wasn't covered in soil. And the grower, he was like, oh, why did he do that? Like, it has to be covered in soil for it to receive, like, to sense the weight, for it to start putting down roots, for it to grow. It has to sense that it's in a safe environment, it's covered, it's protected, it will have enough nutrients, and only then can it get triggered in putting down roots. So it was just a little bean not covered with soil. And we put this sand on top to give it this sensation of feeling covered and protected, because whoever planted it, they put the beans and they didn't push them down into the ground, they didn't cover them with earth. And I was like, okay, so they're not covered, can't I just push them in? And he was like, no. And I was like, why not? And he was like, because this little bean, let's see if you can see it here. This little bean, it's already now open, but it was like a little bean, but it had already started to plump up with water. It had picked up the water that was on top of the, and it had started to plump up. And so it was spreading already. It was like filled with water and spreading. The tissues were spreading and opening up, and it was like preparing to do its thing. And if I pushed it down, he was like, that's just going to, it's going to like squash it down, and it's going to like disturb this process of opening. And so what we did instead is we put sand on top, so to give it the sensation that it's covered. And they did end up looking pretty good. I don't know if you can see them, but they've all grown pretty nicely. But I thought that was really, it was very similar to how we operate in our process in yoga. Like, we're grounding on the ground, we're lying down, we're grounding, we're opening the tissues on our back. And we don't want to go into a like a really stressed position without taking the ground and allowing the ground and nurturing the ground and feeling the sensation of grounding to find the length. So we need to continuously think about how to provide safety and sensations of safety and comfort to the body if we're going to ask it to open, which is very different from somehow people approach their body and how they treat their injuries. So yeah, that was another thing that I thought was really nice and interesting. And another thing that one time, I again connected to sensation, is that one time I just like picked up this it's like a little tray filled with seedlings, and I just dropped it with a clunk. And he's like, oh no, because you're disturbing the roots. So really, although the nervous system that people have, we have nervous system, which is which we use in order to remember the patterns we need to activate in our body to move in space. Because if I don't have patterns, if I'm like a child, every time I want to get from A to B, I have to relearn how to activate, how to pick up my foot, how to put my heel down, how to reach out in order to make the next step. These are patterns that in the beginning as children, we don't have these patterns. But gradually we build them up. Like as children, we start with flexion and extension. We're like on the ground and we're like lifting our head, looking around. Then we start like to touch our little toes, the other toe, and it's only gradually that we build up to this diagonal move, which is essential for walking. And these patterns are built. This is what evolves our nervous system. These are the patterns that help us do things without thinking all the time. Babies sleep a lot because they're doing a lot of mental work. They're building up their sensory integration, their nervous patterns. They're hearing things. They're responding to their what they're seeing, to what they're feeling in their toes, to the weights that's dropping through their heels, and all that is a lot of learning for them. So all they do is they eat and sleep. As adults, we have other responsibilities, like we have to make money and I don't know, procreate, amuse ourselves, do stuff, brush our teeth, things like that. So we actually rely on these patterns to get us from A to B and to do things without so much thinking. But sometimes we start overusing certain parts of ourselves and we start building tension in parts of ourselves and overusing other parts. And that's where yoga is helpful. It brings us back to sensations of comfort so that we can release tension in our body, ground, and help this muscle to feel safe enough to open up like the little bean. And then we use these melt method treatments for the hands and the feet so that we can stimulate the flow from the hand up towards the shoulder, up towards the neck, into the spine, or from our feet up into the knee, up through the inner thigh, through our pelvic floor and towards the spine, so that we integrate and we stimulate the fluid so that we're not like the tomato, which starts to lose its capacity for tensegrity, its capacity to have tension distributed throughout the body, and it starts to flop because it doesn't have enough water to hold it up at the top. It starts to flop. That's what happens to us if we don't hydrate. If we accumulate tension, it stops the fluidity of the body. And we really were, before our nervous system was formed, we were really a fluid little embryo. So the nervous system is the last thing to form. It's like the nervous system and then the muscle. So if you go back to the fluidity of the body, you can refine these patterns that are more fluid and distribute the weight a little bit better, as opposed to this contract and lengthen nervous system stimulation, which might get stuck in nervous system patterns of fear or worry, mental worry, or emotional sadness, or all these things that make us go ooh, like a tomato. Even if we're drinking a lot of water, we have a nice house, we might start dehydrating from emotional stress. Like we might feel really abandoned, or we might feel sad that somebody left, or we might feel challenged that someone's asking something from us. So these are emotional stresses that can also dehydrate the body. So essentially, self-care for hydration of the body is as simple as watering the tomatoes and not pushing ourselves, like taking care of our body is like taking care of a seedling that's trying to create something. Our creativity is stimulated when we take care of our bodies. Yeah, that is what I learned from this place. There's one more thing I can tell you, and I don't know if I'll be able to post this afterwards because here's more plants. Let me see if I can show you. Whee! Yeah, so here, you see how he's put that black tissue, plastic, whereas on the other side he already has plants. Here he's put this plastic, and he's only put it now because what he wants to, it's very hot. First he watered, he put a lot of water on the ground, and all the seeds of all the weeds are in the soil during the winter, and they're kind of dormant. And now when it's getting warm, he put a lot of water because he wants all of them to get as much water and use the worm to start pushing up. And then he put the black cover on top because he wants to cut out the light so they cannot poke through. And then they would just die, because besides water and safety of ground, we also need the ability to lengthen, the ability to stretch out towards the light. So this is the essence of the Esther Meyer approach, is we want to have enough safety of grounding in order to release tension, and we need hydration, we need the breath, the pumping of fluids through our body in order to reach out towards the sun and lengthen our spine. That is the essence of the Esther Meyer's yoga approach that I teach, that I learned from Tama and Monica. And it's very similar to how plants grow. They need ground to feel safe and to know that they will have nourishment, to put their roots down, and then they need water to hydrate, like we need the breath to stimulate the diaphragm to work, to pump the fluids in our body. And we have many diaphragms. We have a diaphragm in our throat, we have a diaphragm in our hands, we have a diaphragm in our feet. When we walk, we have a diaphragm in our pelvic floor. So yeah, this is how it works. And I'm gonna finish with a little dance, just to show you how to release this throat area, which sometimes get really blocked in our Surya Namaskar when we reach up towards the sun. And I learned this today and I really like it. I felt this today. This is all about feeling, in case you haven't noticed. Let's see, where can I put this? Actually, I'm gonna do it in another video. So see ya. Hope you enjoyed my hydration and plants little lecture. My name is Camelia. I teach the melt method and the Esther Meyer's yoga approach to help people get out of pain, stay out of pain, release tension, sleep better, regulate their nervous system, come out of anxiety, get rid of brain fog, stimulate their autonomous and regulate their autonomic nervous system. Thanks for watching. Bye.